Come see us on tour in Los Angeles, Honolulu, Dallas, Texas, Baltimore, Atlantic City, Cohoes, New York, and Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and only there. So Jimmy Carter died, former President Jimmy Carter, and everybody has deified him into being a great guy.
I didn't like him when he was president.
He was a bad president. So Matt Stoller, friend of the show, and committed Democrat. Don't ever think for a second he's not voting for Kamala Harris. He is. Jimmy Carter was a terrible president, and he's wildly overrated as an ex-president. He endorsed NAFTA and China PNTR. He's beloved by some parts of the left because he S-talked America in a way they appreciate. We've slashed regulations and put free enterprise back into airlines. So if you like the flying experience today, you should thank President Carter. He also did that to trucking. So trucking wages are like half of, in real wages, half of what they were in 1980, thanks to Jimmy Carter. So that's why being a trucker isn't a well-paying job like it used to be. It's just like the railroad. It's the glue that holds capitalism together, and they don't care. And Jimmy Carter did that. He deregulated the trucking industry.
That's the way he distracts. So when they start calling you a communist for whatever minor liberal thing you said people liked, you make up for it by doing shit like that.
Yes.
So Obama, we drilled more than anyone. Remember that speech? Yeah.
So this is Jimmy Carter, quote from him. We slashed regulations and put free enterprise back into airlines, trucking, and banks. And finally. And we're now doing the same for the railroads. And you saw what happened to the railroads, right? They can't even get a sick paid day off. This is the greatest change in the relationship between government and business since the New Deal. That's Jimmy Carter. So the reason when you fly on an airplane and they charge you to bring on a carry-on, you can thank Jimmy Carter. And the snack bag is the size of a pack of playing cards. You could thank Jimmy Carter. And only one ass cheek fits in the airplane seat to begin with. You can thank Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
And if you and now Joe Biden is going to import truck drivers to suppress their wages even more on his way out the door. You know how Elon and Vivek want to bring in people from India to do our high tech work?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we can't do that. We don't have people here who aren't smart enough. That's all a lie.
Yeah, so on his way in, Trump's going to fuck the engineers, and the truckers are fucked on the way out.
On the way out.
We got a perfect system.
That's right. So that's Matt Stoller. He signed a major rail deregulation bill. That's right. This is the act of the capstone of my efforts over the past 4 years to get the federal government off the backs of private industry. So there you go. Here, he also said, I realize that most people looking at Jimmy Carter see a nice man who did a lot of charity, but I'm focused on what he did as president on political economy. It was ugly, and he didn't stop. He endorsed NAFTA and China. What is China PNTR? I wonder what that is. What does that stand?
Is that the one that Obama was going to do, the Pacific thing that Trump got rid of?
That was the WTO, the World Trade, or he was going. Yeah, it was like a world version of the.
It was a Pacific thing.
So yeah,
Pacific NAFTA.
So sure, Jimmy Carter did all those things, but he did them in a gentle, cuddly way. He didn't tweet mean things, and he spoke in a soft voice from a mouth filled with peanuts.
Ha.
Isn't that nice?
Jimmy, I believe it's permanent normal trade relations for China.
There you go.
We don't already have that?
Wait till you hear what Carter administration did in the meatpacking industry. So I don't have to read you this. He screwed over he made it easy for the meatpacking industry to consolidate and screw over its workers, which is why it's all staffed by immigrants and illegal immigrants. Because you can pay them less and they can't unionize.
The government gave them a grant to do it at Purdue.
Yeah.
And at the Getty, they have to bring in foreigner. They have to do it. Like it's like the original H-1B, by the way, is because Congress is getting bribed by Indian staffing agencies. So this is all like they were getting all this money to do it. It's crazy. He's part of all of it.
Chris Hedges wrote this article, Don't Deify Jimmy Carter. Out of office, he had the courage to call out the abominable oppression and persecution and strict segregation of Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza in his 2006 book, Palestine, Peace Not Apartheid. He dedicated himself to monitoring elections, including his controversial defense of the 2006 election of Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, and championed human rights around the globe. He lambasted the American political process as an oligarchy in which unlimited political bribery created a complete subversion of our political system as a payoff to major contributors. But Carter's years as an ex-president should not mask his dogged service to the empire, penchant for fomenting disastrous proxy wars, betrayal of the Palestinians, embrace of punishing neoliberal policies, and his subservience to big business when he was in office. Carter played a significant role in dismantling New Deal legislation with the deregulation of major industries, including airlines, banking, trucking, telecommunications, natural gas, and railways. He appointed Paul Volcker to the Federal Reserve, who, in an effort to combat inflation, drove up interest rates and pushed the U.S. into the deepest recession since the Great Depression, a move that saw the start of punishing austerity cuts. Carter is the godfather of the pillage known as neoliberalism, a pillage fellow Democrat Bill Clinton would turbocharge. Carter fell under the disastrous influence of his Svengali-like national security advisor, Zbigniew Brzezinski, a Polish exile who rejected the Nixon-Kissinger reliance on détente with the Soviet Union. Brzezinski's life's mission, one that meant he saw the world in black and white, was to confront and destroy the Soviet Union along with any government or movement he deemed to be under communist influence or sympathetic to it. Carter, under Brzezinski's influence, walked away from the strategic arms limitation, that's the SALT II, with the Soviet Union, which sought to curb nuclear weapons deployment. He increased military spending. He sent military aid to the Indonesian New Order government during the Indonesian invasion and occupation of East Timor, which many have characterized as a genocide. So Jimmy Carter did his own genocide. He did it in East Timor. He supported, along with the apartheid state of South Africa, the murderous counter-revolutionary group, the National Union for the Total Independence of Angola, led by Jonas Savimbi. He provided aid to the brutal Zairian dictator Mobutu Sese Seko. He supported the Khmer Rouge.
Hey, also like Chomsky.
He instructed the CIA to back opposition groups and political parties to bring down the Sandinista government in Nicaragua once it took power in 1979, leading under the Reagan administration to the formation of the Contras and a bloody and senseless U.S.-backed insurgency. So he was just like all of them. He tried to overthrow, when people take control of their governments, the Western economic hitmen can't have that. So they go and spend millions and billions of dollars to fund and arm insurgent groups, terrorists, to overthrow governments. He provided military aid to the dictatorship in El Salvador, ignoring an appeal from Archbishop Oscar Romero, later assassinated, to cease U.S. arms shipments.
That's my favorite. That, like all the good priests and bishops, you could spot them because they get killed.
He poisoned U.S. relations with Iran by backing the repressive regime of the Shah until the last minute, and then allowing the deposed Shah to seek medical treatment in New York, triggering the occupation of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and a 440-day hostage crisis. Carter's belligerence, he froze Iranian assets, stopped importing oil from Iran, and expelled 183 Iranian diplomats from the United States. He played into Ayatollah Khomeini's demonization of the United States and calls for Islamic rule. He obliterated the credibility of Iran's secular opposition. So,
wait, was that the plan all along? It almost like it was the plan all along.
It's almost like that was the plan. Carter gave Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos, although he ruled under martial law, billions in military aid. He armed the Mujahideen in Afghanistan after the Soviet intervention in 1979, a decision that cost the U.S. $3 billion, saw the deaths of 1.5 million Afghans, and led to the creation of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. Jimmy Carter created Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. What's that?
That wasn't in Charlie Wilson's war.
No,
the
that
Great
was
Aaron Sorkin picture.
No, they left all that out.
That's weird.
The blowback from his Carter policy alone is catastrophic. He backed the South Korean military in 1980 when it laid siege to the city of Gwangju, where protesters had formed a militia which led to the massacre of 2,000 people. Finally, he sold out the Palestinians when he negotiated a separate peace deal known as the Camp David Accords in 1979 between Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin. The agreement excluded the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, from the talks. Israel never, as promised to Carter, attempted to resolve the Palestinian question with Jordan and Egypt's involvement. It never permitted Palestinian self-government in the West Bank and Gaza within 5 years. It did not end Israeli settlements, a refusal that led Carter to later claim Begin had lied to him. But since there was no mechanism in the agreement for enforcement, and since Carter was unwilling to defy the Israeli lobby to impose sanctions on Israel, the Palestinians found themselves once again powerless and abandoned. Carter, to his credit, did appoint the civil rights activist Patricia Darian as his Assistant Secretary of State for Human Rights and Humanitarian Affairs, leading to the blocking of loans and reduction in military aid to the military junta in Argentina during the Dirty War, restrictions the Reagan administration removed. Darian's commitment to human rights was genuine. She supported Philippines leader Benigo Aquino and South Korean dissident and former President Kim Dae-jung. Carter allowed her to anger a few of our most repressive allies. But his human rights policy was primarily designed to back democratic dissidents and worker movements in Central and Eastern Europe, especially Poland, in an effort to weaken the Soviet Union. Carter had a decency most politicians lack, but his moral crusades, which came once he was out of power, seemed like a form of penance.
Yeah, they did, didn't they?
Yes. His record as president is bloody and dismal. Although not as bloody and dismal as the presidents who followed him, that's the best we could say about Jimmy Carter.
Well, there was all the drug problems in Miami that he directly, because of the open arms policy that Biden later did for the entire country.
See, do you want to hear here's what, although Jimmy Carter was unique among former U.S. presidents for taking a principled stand against the genocidal Israel apartheid regime, while he was in office, he too was a war criminal, Zionist fanatic, like the rest of them. So he doesn't get the first part correct. Nice try, Z Squirrel, but you didn't get that right. But anyway, thanks for the video. So here we go. Chomsky's going to tell you what he did in East Timor.
Carter increased as the Indonesian atrocities were increasing. They peaked in 1978. Carter's flow of weapons to Indonesia increased when Congress imposed human rights restrictions. By then there was a human rights movement in Congress to block the flow of advanced weaponry to Indonesia. Carter arranged through Mondale, vice president, to get Israel to send U.S. Skyhawks to Indonesia to enable Indonesia to complete what turned out to be near genocide, killing maybe a quarter of the population or something. In the Middle East, Carter just won the Nobel Prize. His great achievement was the Camp David agreements. The Camp David agreements are presented as a diplomatic triumph for the United States. In fact, they were a diplomatic catastrophe. At Camp David, the United States and Israel accepted, finally, Egypt's 1971 offer, which they had then, U.S. had rejected at the time, except that now it was worse from the U.S.-Israeli point of view because it included the Palestinians. In order to get Israel to accept Egypt's 1971 offer, after a major war and atrocities and so on, Carter raised aid, military and other aid to Israel, to more than 50% of total aid worldwide. Israel used it at once in exactly the way they said they were going to do, as every sane person knew. as an opportunity to attack their northern neighbor, first in 1978, then in 1982, and to increase integration of the occupied territories.
It's the oldest story in the book, and Jimmy Pardo was right. Jimmy Carter was right
Jimmy
there with
Pardo?
it. I almost said Jimmy Pardo. Jimmy Carter was
Don't
right
cut
there.
your own hair. Jimmy Pardo was right. You know what's amazing watching him say this, especially after watching him with his concentration camp phase he went through? I love that he's exposing all the things Carter did, but now Noam, I assume, is smarter than me, and this is the thing I can pick up pretty fucking easily. The president ain't the boss. He's an employee. Just like Noam Chomsky, and Noam Chomsky's job is to be the guy that makes you think the president is the guy, but he's not. And Jimmy Carter's doing that to make up for his crimes because he probably had to do them. The president, even in top secret shit, is 8th on the list. He's only there 48 years, remember?
Yeah.
They don't get to know everything. That's a fact. That's not a thing I pulled out of something.
Yeah.
So just knowing that and watching this is one actor, just like the actor you had from The Matrix who was on that disappointed you.
Well, I love that
Chomsky
had no questions about the COVID response from Big Pharma and the government. No questions about 9/11. None. It happened just the way the government said.
He's cast, and that's what this is. The thought leaders, you're cast in the role, whether you know it or not, just like he told that reporter, and he was right. I'll bet this dipshit is knowingly doing it, because why else was he at Epstein Island?
And that's for starters. We can continue.
East Timor was a Portuguese colony. Indonesia had no claim to it, and in fact stated that they had no claim to it.
So Indonesia was a Portuguese colony, and Indonesia just decided to go take it over, and Carter gave them the weapons to do it, and they committed a genocide.
Have you seen the documentary, The Act of Killing, about that genocide?
No.
It's like if the Nazis won the war and were really cool in their country after. It's amazing. A guy that killed so many people, he describes it. It's one of the most interesting documentaries I've ever seen. The Act of Killing. It's all about that.
All right. So there's more to this, but you get the idea. Jimmy Carter, although he was a good ex-president, it was him making up for his guilty conscience. He was a neoliberal on steroids. He wrecked the trucking industry, the railroad industry, the meatpacking industry. He funded his own genocide, just like Joe Biden.
During the period of colonization, there was a good deal of politicization that different groups developed. A civil war broke out in August '75. It ended up in a victory for Fredlin, which was one of the groupings, described as populist Catholic in character with some typical leftish rhetoric. Indonesia at once started intervening. Ford and Kissinger visited Jakarta, I think it was December 5th. We know that they had requested that Indonesia delay the invasion until after they left because it would be too embarrassing. And within hours, I think, after they left, the invasion took place on December 7th.
This council must consider international aggression against East Timor as the main issue of the discussion.
When the Indonesians invaded, the UN reacted as it always does, calling for sanctions and condemnation and so on. Various watered-down resolutions were passed, but the U.S. was very clearly not going to allow anything to work.
So Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan was always thought was a good guy. He was there to make sure that that took place, that they didn't do anything to stop that. And so Chomsky, the problem with Chomsky is he's going to tell you that these people they're doing a genocide, and then he's going to tell you, but you must vote for them. Because he always told you have to vote for the Democrat. Yeah. Every 4 years, you have to vote for the Democrat. Every 4 years.
Doesn't really make sense, does it?
What's that?
It doesn't really make sense, does it?
No, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that he would go, you know what people really should do is rise up. And in fact, if you have a Republican in office, you have a chance for people who are Democrats to actually protest. When it's Barack Obama or Joe Biden or Bill Clinton, nobody's going to protest. Nobody's going to protest their warmongering, their genociding. Nobody.
Go Yankees, I guess.
Yeah. Hey, so that's the problem with Chomsky, which makes a lot of people say he's not what he seemed to be.
Hey, the act of killing is not about East Timor. It's about the Indonesian civil. It's still in Indonesia. I just want to correct myself.
Okay.
Also, remember Christopher Hitchens? He had a thing about Osama bin Laden. One of the reasons Osama bin Laden in his manifesto attacked us was because of what we didn't eat.
Go ahead.
Timor.
Yeah.
And Hitchens, and I remember this still, I think he was arguing that it was great that we got involved in East Timor.
Yeah, he thought it was great we got involved in Iraq.
Yeah.
Hitchens was right about a lot of stuff, and he didn't mess around. When he got something wrong, he was really wrong. He didn't mess around.
Yeah. Well, you know what happens? Because he was so Mr. Atheist. So now, okay, there's no God. So what hope is there in this world? Sure, America's not perfect, but there's worse evils out there. And we got to get rid of these Saddam Husseins and such.
Yeah.
And so because he's already cocked up in the head from the start, because once you have, it's really amazing watching how somebody's hamster wheel turns when they come up with a bad decision like that.
Come see us on tour in Los Angeles, Honolulu, Dallas, Texas, Baltimore, Atlantic City, Cohoes, New York, and Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and only there.